Good morning and welcome to the first SMSC assembly. Normally these assemblies would take place in the hall, but for obvious reasons we're not allowed to gather in those spaces, and so I'm recording this at the moment in one of the labs. Now, in years gone by, I've started my assembly by talking about this particular time of year. I will have talked about how the staff had gathered in the hall on the inset days before you came back to school, and you can see them all here in a photograph from last year. I'd talk about how we were excited about the start of the academic year and how we were gathering and preparing ready for your return in September. I would also talk about how supermarkets were preparing for Christmas. And no doubt you may well have been in the supermarkets and seen on the shelves a range of chocolates that you only ever see at Christmas time. Big tubs of Heroes and Roses and Quality Street, for example. I would usually talk about the start of the football season as well, because at this time of year we're underway with that, and I'm sure it's going to be another thrilling season. And I would usually talk about this being my favourite time of the year as we head into autumn because of all the colours that we'd start to see on the leaves on the trees. However, we've begun this academic year in a way that's different to others. And although things may seem normal because we're back in the building and we're back in lessons and we're doing our best with teaching and learning, things haven't gone back to the way that we would remember them way back in February and March time. Things may seem familiar, but they are very different too. We're having to wear our masks as we walk around the building. We've got a one-way system in place. We've got exclusion zones in classrooms. You're sitting so you're all facing the front, and the government and the NHS are giving the message out to everybody to wash your hands, to cover your face, and to make space. And so, although we've come back to school, the circumstances that we find ourselves in, they're not normal. They're not how we would want them to be, and it's not how it has been in years gone by. And so, unfortunately, the start of my assembly isn't going to be lengthy discussions about football or autumn. I am, however, going to talk about other things that you may already have listened to or seen. Now, during lockdown, I had recorded a few episodes of Desert Island Discs with the help of some members of staff. And with those episodes, staff were talking about their favourite pieces of music or their favourite books, or what they would do to spend time while they're on a desert island, and which people they would want to invite there. They're still available on YouTube if you want to take a look at those, if they passed you by and you've missed them. But I do want to spend just a little bit of time talking about the things that members of staff revealed about themselves. There may be some things that you didn't know about them, and if you listen to the episodes, you find out little bits of information. So, for example, Mrs. Stoddart, you all know her as an art and design teacher, keen photographer, but you may not know that one of her hidden talents is that she's a really good pianist. She plays piano to a high level, and you might not know that about her. Miss Hilditch, you may know, is a maths teacher, and for those of you who've been involved with Duke of Edinburgh, with DOV, you'll know that she helps out with that as well. But what you may not know is that despite her being a maths teacher and great with numbers, she's actually good with words too. And she's a keen and avid reader and reads a lot more than I do, and perhaps most other members of staff as well. Dr. Hughes is more than just a chemistry teacher, because he's teaching physics as well sometimes and teaching biology also. But beyond that, a hidden talent of his, something you may not know, he's a really good cricketer. He plays at quite a high level and plays regularly as well. But that's something that you may not have known about him. Mrs. McGeehan also has a hidden talent. Now, unlike Dr. Hughes, it's not a sporting thing. Unlike Miss Hilditch, it's nothing to do with books or reading. You may not know this, some of you might, but Mrs. McGeehan's hidden talent, she can do a really good impression of Donald Duck. And I urge you, next time you see her, ask her to do her impression of Donald Duck. It's one of the best impressions I've ever heard. Moving on to Mr. Barker, not just a teacher in the art and design department, and not just a good footballer, as some of you may know. Something that you may not even know about him is that he had a life before teaching. He was involved working for a graphic design company down in London. And those of you who've watched certain films will know that you can buy merchandise, you can buy books or t-shirts and that kind of stuff. Well, Mr. Barker has worked on many films. For example, he designed the rucksack that you could buy if you're a fan of the film Rio. And similarly, if you're a fan of Spider-Man and figured, oh yes, I want to go off and get myself a Spider-Man wallet, well, as you can see, there's the wallet. Mr. Barker designed that. And finally, I'm going to talk about Mr. Cole. Now, I thought I knew what Mr. Cole's hidden talent was. I know him to be really quite a good sportsman. He's able to play a range of sports and be really quite good at them. And he would describe himself as a jack of all trades and a master of none. And I think that does him a disservice, because actually I think he's really good at sports. And we all know that one person who's just good at everything when it comes to PE. But it turns out that's not his hidden talent. That's not the thing that we don't know about him. And actually I don't know what his hidden talent is. So unlike Miss Hilditch, who I know is a really good reader, and unlike Mrs. Stoddart, who can play the piano really well, unlike Mr. Barker, who had a life as a graphic designer and had made lots of things that you may well have bought, unlike Dr. Hughes, who's a really good cricketer, and unlike Mrs. McGeehan, who can do really good impressions of Donald Duck, I don't know what Mr. Cole's hidden talent actually is. And it may be that you don't know what Mr. Cole's hidden talent is either. In the same way that you may know a little bit about a person, there's plenty about your friends perhaps that you don't know. Some people use an analogy, a model, and say that human beings are like icebergs. There's only certain parts of the iceberg that you can see. In the same way, there's only certain things about somebody that you know. Most of the iceberg is hidden beneath the surface of the water. You can't see it. Perhaps most of what somebody is like is something that we don't know about. In these selfie-obsessed times, people are all too happy to share on social media about things that they enjoy, things that they like, their opinions about certain issues. But perhaps there's a lot about people that you just don't know anything about. You don't know if they're having a good day or a bad day. You don't know if there are certain issues that they're having to deal with on a personal level. You don't know what their life was like during lockdown, because they may well have really enjoyed that because they're able to get on with work without distractions. Or actually, for them, lockdown was not a great experience because they weren't able to see friends or family that they were so desperately missed. There's plenty about people that we don't know about, and those are just some examples. And so because we don't know what people are going through on a day-to-day basis, it's really important that we're kind. Now, I started by saying that normally at this time of year, my assemblies would talk about autumn or chocolates or the fact that we're coming back. But the one thing that I do talk about, and I will talk about still, is just being kind. How can you be kind to other people? What are the things that you can do that just makes their lives a little bit easier? We all have moments in life where we can feel things are going really well, and then sometimes things aren't going as well as we'd want them to. Life is difficult enough as it is without having to deal with people who aren't being kind or being considerate or just thinking of others. So in a world where you can be anything, be kind. Martin Luther King once said that life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? So if you're wondering about how it is that you can be kind, well, here's a couple of simple things just to think about. Now, as we are in the middle of a global pandemic, perhaps one way that we can demonstrate being kind and show that we're thinking of others and being considerate is to wash our hands, to cover our faces, and to keep our distance. That way we can reduce the spread of the virus. And you don't know, perhaps, who others, your friends, are in contact with. They may be vulnerable people in their families. And by just following these 3 simple things, we can stop that virus being passed on to somebody who could really suffer from it as a result of getting it. And we can be kind to others just by thinking about the way we speak to them, thinking about the way we interact with them on social media, thinking about the messages that we send. So before you speak, think, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it important? Is it necessary? But above all, is it kind? So to finish, it's not just talents that people keep hidden. Sometimes it may well be their feelings that they keep hidden too. And because you don't know what people are going through, how people are feeling, what it is that they're having to cope with, sometimes the best way that we can help and support one another is simply just to be kind.